back to Mid-Maryland Votes. Tonight we sit down with Frederick County Board of Education candidate Tyler Walker, a United States Army National Guard infantry officer, father, former teacher, and advocate for parental rights, for a conversation about Policy 443 and the growing battle over the future of our schools. Walker says this fight isn't about Democrats or Republicans at all. It's about common sense, transparency, and making sure schools work with parents instead of against them. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my esteemed guest, Tyler Walker. He's a candidate for the Board of Education for Frederick County Public Schools. Tyler, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you taking the time, and really excited to get to talk to you guys today.
Well, you got to be excited about running for the Board of Education, huh?
It's a unique animal, and quick story of how I got involved with it is as I left education, and we can talk about that more in a minute. I saw some things being floated around on social media and responded to something that then led to, hey, you got to meet this guy, and then you got to meet this guy. And lo and behold, I was asked like, hey, would you be interested in running? It's like, brother, like we talked about, man, I've got, 3 kids and I'm coaching sports and I got the National Guard and a full-time job. And he was like, yeah, but listen, we need good fathers who are actively engaged and concerned with, what's going on in FCPS, and kind of realized it was such a time as this, such a place as now. And, who other than, me, right? That if I'm not going to do it, who's going to step up? So I am very excited about it. I'm very passionate about this. I've got my oldest is in FCPS right now. I've got 2 younger kids that'll be coming through in the coming years. So I think we're at a very pivotal point in our culture and in education that we can fix a lot of the things that are going on. And again, it's such a time as this. So I am very excited about it. Got a great team, and we're looking forward to the elections coming up.
That's a great saying. If not me, who? If not now, when?
That's right.
I think that was Julius Caesar or somebody. I don't know.
As a history buff, I should know, but I think it gets floated around a lot.
I give all credit to Benjamin Franklin. Like, I'll just make something up and I'll say, yeah, Ben Franklin.
Yeah, him or Thomas Jefferson, one of the two. They were spitballing.
Thomas Jefferson is my backup. Tyler, we have the same playbook.
Come on.
Tell me about your Army National Guard experience. I know that must be amazing. Are you full-time National Guard?
So National Guard is a part-time position, but I have still been in consistently for 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very proud of my service. I enlisted when I was 17 in high school, and it was a unique experience. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. I have a unique educational background. I was homeschooled up and through my entire life till my junior year of high school. We moved from Virginia to Florida to Pennsylvania, and we moved to Pennsylvania. I went to public school for the first time. A 17-year-old in South Central PA. Coming from Florida, playing football now with these big corn-fed Husky boys,
Mm-hmm.
Whole different animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't going to accept my homeschool credits. So I ended up applying for and getting into a private school for my senior year, but I needed to find a way to pay for it. I also was, like we mentioned, a big history buff and loved the military and loved the idea of service. I would love to do that, to be that guy in uniform that goes and helps his community and serves his nation. So a buddy of mine had just joined the Guard, convinced me that was the route to go. And then when I got to college, I ended up doing ROTC there because I was tired of cleaning toilets and, shoveling dirt and, sweeping the rain. And I thought maybe this is how I can kind of make a greater influence, right? And to really help people. And I'm now an infantry officer in a armored cavalry regiment, basically an armor brigade.
Right.
But it's been great. It's been a good, 16 years. Now, I'm the senior platoon trainer for the officer candidate school and for the state of Maryland out in Edgewood. So I get to train future officers and just give my experience and my background. And I get to have that little fix of teaching, after I left the classroom in 2021.
As a former Air Force security policeman and enlisted man, I appreciate the fact that you get to beat up on the officers the way they deserve it.
That's right. ROTC, I think, kind of crafts the gentleman type officers. The academy has kind of the ring knocking, esteemed officers. And OCS is really just a punch in the face for a year and a half and creates a very focused attention to detail officer. But we need them all, and it's really cool to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah, I loved my military time. I can't tell you a bad thing about it. It was great. I had a good time. And like you, I traveled the world and had a lot of impact on a lot of people and did a lot of things I never thought I would do. So
absolutely.
But anyway,
that's great. Well, thank you for your service as well.
Oh, no, I'm telling you, man, I really do appreciate and respect what you're doing for our country. you're a candidate for the Board of Education for the Frederick County Public Schools, which has had a rough couple of years. They've had a lot of controversies. They had some issues in the classroom and outside the classroom. But right now, it's a Board of Education that's dominated by progressive, liberal thinking people. I don't term it conservative and liberal. It's common sense to me and progressive, right? So,
Sure.
what side do you fall on?
Yeah, so I think aptly named, we call ourselves the common sense slate, right? So, the unique nature of the school board is that it is a nonpartisan election. And some folks have pushed for us to have a party affiliate.
It's supposed to be a nonpartisan race.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And yet, you really, in today's society, especially, it's kind of impossible to take, your political ideology, completely away from, what you're doing, because it kind of shapes your perspective, right?
Sure.
So to that end, I'm a conservative. I'm not ashamed of that, and I probably identify as a constitutional libertarian, but fallen, under kind of the Republican Party. I'm part of, again, this common sense slate that are all conservatives. We've also now been supported and backed by the Maryland Orange Ballot, which is another parental rights, common sense, focused on academic excellence and getting ideology out of the classroom. We've also been, my slate specifically has been backed by Better Maryland Schools, another parental rights and school choice advocacy group. So these are kind of the lanes that we would fall under where, there's never been a conservative majority in the Frederick County School Board ever. Since there's been elections, we've never had a majority. And we can see where the direction of that has taken, right? I taught in Northern Virginia originally. After I got my degree, I've taught in Pennsylvania and then in Frederick County for about a year and a half. And you can see where conservatives really took a step back and didn't focus on education. And I feel like we really dropped the ball as a conservative think tank and letting, this left-leaning ideology take a grip hold on our education system because, the people who are in schools now, right, they're the future leaders of America. And if we don't pay attention to that and we allow them to continue to get fed propaganda or, lies, then those are kind of the ideas that they're going to take with them in the future.
I've heard that described as the school boards are kind of like the Trojan horse, indoctrinating students, even in deep red counties. Would you agree with that? Or would you say that these liberal school boards are just out of neglect?
I want to truly believe that people who do these have our students' best interests in heart. I'm not the type of person to point and say that these are evil people or that, there's some secret hidden agenda until it's laid out in front of me, right? And in some cases, I have seen that. And I will say at the state level, I do think there is some hidden agenda. There's some secret, kind of push to hide some of the indoctrination in, different forms and content, where instead of having, like the family life and sexuality lessons, they're going to maybe add in an English curriculum, some gender, diverse kind of language. And then, the common sense parent might look at that and say, okay, well, there's different types of family groups. Is it so bad to explain that, there are, kids who have two fathers, two moms, whatever. And okay, if you want to have a conversation about that, that's one thing. But when we get to the point where you're now having books in libraries that explain, sexually promiscuous things almost in a graphic way, what is the educational purpose of that, right? We're not trying to, this isn't anymore about helping kids feel included. This isn't anymore about, tolerance and acceptance. This seems to be really an idea of pushing, a message and trying to be discreet about it. And we just ask as common sense educators and common sense parents, why? If we're looking at the bare bones basics here, we have a consistently high graduation rate in Frederick County and a consistently declining math and English literacy rate. So I am much more concerned about preparing our students for the future, whether it's higher education, career tech, military, or going into the workforce, than I am with how well they understand, gender nonconforming, LGBTQ, AI plus, all the different, colors of the rainbow. I want to make sure they understand, what is going to help them be successful in life.
So I think what you're saying is it's not that, people's gender identity or their family situations is unimportant.
That's right.
It's not as important as the academics of learning to be a good student.
Absolutely. And again, when I was in the classroom, I taught every student from every creed, color, an orientation. In Northern Virginia, I had immigrant students and I had, students whose families have been here for generations. I had all different types, right? And I taught 12th grade government during 2016, right? The most contentious election we've had in a long time. And the first lesson I had, I put up a Trump poster and a Hillary poster, and I said, welcome in, get ready to get triggered, right? Like, we're all going to have difficult conversations. We're going to talk about the things that matter, right? And we did current events. I had voter registration drives in my classroom. I did mock trials. I did debates and had a phenomenal couple years at Fauquier High School. Fast forward then to Monocacy Middle School. We're built for 600, had 900 at the time, and really wanted to make a difference in the lives of those kids, but dealt with discipline issues in the classroom, lacking support from administration, poor physical infrastructure and security, and all the things that I want to see upgraded. But I did really feel like from central office, there was this push to educators that we needed to be aware of our privilege, that we needed to, become more socially aware. And my question every time was why? Like, you need good teachers. Why do I need to now be cautiously aware of who I am? I didn't choose this. I'm just a dude trying to do a job. I'm just a dad trying to help kids, right? Trying to teach them history. And if you're a math teacher, teach math. If you're a social studies teacher, teach. If you're an English teacher, just teach. That's your job. And I don't understand what the goal is of all this. And that's why, again, I mentioned this, at Board of Ed meetings that, especially with Policy 443, I don't think it's evil. I don't think it's out to, destroy or anything. I just think it's misguided. I think there's people who have a genuine care and concern for students who are non-conforming, to a gender, and they think that this is the best practice, and I just think they're misguided. And so I just disagree with the execution.
So you bring up Policy 443, and we talked about this recently with Jamie Brennan, who's on the school board presently. And it is very controversial. It's a controversial policy. If we encapsulate it, which I'll let you do, came to light that this policy has got some major issues with it. What do you think is the biggest policy problem or part of 443?
I think it's their parental notification. I think that right out the gate, there's a multitude. The access to facilities, the overnight sports trips, it's all, there's multiple, but one of the first things right out the gate is the idea that schools are in a position to keep information from parents at 12 years old, nonetheless. And I don't know, if anybody listening knows many 12-year-olds, but in what universe do we think that a 12-year-old has the autonomy to keep information from their parents? Okay, they're people, absolutely, and they're your children, and okay, but you're the primary caregiver of this child, right? And they're going to go in and say that maybe they want to change their name or their pronoun, and maybe it's not that serious, right? And these, people who oppose this talk about, well, what if it's a nickname? That's not what we're talking about, right? If they're called Billy and they want to be called Bob, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a request to change their identity and potentially access different facilities, to play on a different sports team, to go on overnight field trips,
to receive counseling.
To receive counseling that will be gender affirming with whatever they choose, right? Under
all of it without a parent's even not approval, but even knowledge.
That's right. And you have to request it. You have to submit a Freedom of Information Act request to get that information from the schools. Here's the thing.
Child's records. You need a Freedom of Information Act because of this policy.
That's right. And I got an email literally yesterday that my son was sent to the principal's office over, being a little high energy in the classroom. And I was like, great, that's awesome. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to have a conversation with him, and we addressed it at home. So my child, I get to know if he's absent, tardy, goes to the nurse, goes to the principal, whatever, constant communication. But if he decides at 12 years old that he wants to change his core identity, that information is going to be kept from me. That's not common sense. That doesn't make sense to the average parent. Right. And then they put it under this guise of, well, it's to protect the child. Well, they're going to be kicked out of their home, if they go back and their parents know. What are we talking about? Okay. We already have mandated reporting requirements. Every teacher is a mandated reporter. So if there's ever any threat of bodily harm or anything that could happen to a child, that teacher has to report it to their administrator. It will get reported to the local authorities or CPS, and they'll conduct a wellness check and make sure that the child's safety is okay. That is our number one priority. So this idea that we want to leave children up to abuse or that we don't care about, it is nonsense. It could not be farther from the truth. We want to make sure there's honesty and transparency and common sense communication between a institution that is not the parent and the parent and primary caregiver.
So you bring up the vulnerable students. Where is the balance between protecting these vulnerable students, affirming their identity? Because all of us are compassionate human beings. Nobody wants ill will towards any trans child or any child who's having issues or being bullied. Where is the balance?
It's a great question. I think that ultimately it comes down to defaulting to a parent, right? These schools like to say that we are the in loco parentis, right? In lieu of parents, we are the authority, and we are not. Okay, we are there to educate, facilitate, and discipline administratively. But long gone are the days of any sort of educator, acting as any sort of parental role. It is not their job. You are a government employee, right? You did not raise those kids. You did not birth those kids. You do not house, feed, or care for those children, right? And in some cases, teachers are put in those positions, to be kind of, a mentor to students. But when it comes to a child's identity, we are not qualified to give any sort of medical advice, to a child on whether they should pursue, this new gender identity. We're not in a position, to be a like a confidentiality, type of a person, right? That is left up to a counselor, right? That is provided by, the parents, that they have a say in, right? If they're going to therapy, that should be provided by them and not by the schools. It's not our right. It's not our role. And so I think the balance there is that there already are bullying policies and procedures for in the school in place. There are already mandated reporting requirements put in place. So we just created a policy that was ultimately unnecessary to address issues that are already addressed elsewhere. And it only adds additional confusion because now we're creating new schools with bathrooms that just say student. And they had to put a photo up of two administrators to show which one was male and female because it just said student on both sides. It's like, what are we doing? If you want to create a private space for someone who is undergoing, has gender dysphoria or is gender nonconforming, create a gender neutral bathroom. Great. If you want to have male, female locker rooms and there needs to be a private space, that gender neutral bathroom sounds like a perfect place for that student, or even someone who has social anxiety and doesn't want to be in a large bathroom. Great. Gender, neutral bathroom, right? A singular place for anyone who's going through that or doesn't feel comfortable in a larger bathroom or who's undergone bullying and doesn't want to go in the bigger bathroom, private bathroom. That I think solves the majority of these problems. But instead we create an entire policy that's just added more confusion.
This policy also mandates punishment for both teachers and students who do not use preferred pronouns, and there's no opt-out. How do you feel about that?
Well, they recently made updates that allow for teachers to have a religious exemption, right? If you do not feel that, if you feel that it goes against your religious beliefs to not refer to a student by their given name or pronoun, then you can be exempt from that. And I will tell you, when I taught at Monocacy, I did have 6 13-year-old girls come to me about their name and pronoun and wanted to change them in 1 year. In my 4.5 years at Fauquier High, I never had a single student, but in 1 year at Monocacy, I had 6. So I do feel that there's a little bit of a social kind of, coercion to this.
Almost like a contagion.
That's right. And it's kind of, if you get these girls who feel that they're rejected by society, this can kind of create this idea that I can be part of a group. And it's not to say, again, that there are not those who are genuinely, confused or undergoing some sort of gender dysphoria. And to those students, I said this, at the school board, and I'll say it again. There's nothing wrong with you. You do not need to change your name or your identity or your body to please or appease anyone, right? You are created, in a unique way, fearfully and wonderfully made, and you do not need to change anything, to appease anyone.
So the question was, where's the balance? Where's the balance between taking care of these at-risk children and, teaching, getting academics done? I mean, the primary mission of a school is to educate our children, not to create socially aware children, but to actually educate children.
I think that the argument that the left typically uses is that this is what our society looks like, and we want to reflect society in our schools. They want to allow them to protest and do all these things. And yet again, it's not the role of education, right? We need to get back to a classical model of education mirrored by the Frederick Classical Charter School, which, by the way, is more diverse than any school in our county and yet has higher academic scores and graduation rates than any school in our county. And it's because they focus on academics. They're not focused on any of this extra added social confusion or, getting involved in protesting. It is reading, writing, and math, early intervention, low emphasis on technology, and creating critical thinkers, right? Teaching them how to think, not what to think. And that's what we need to be focused on. I think all of this as a whole is really a distraction from focusing on the core issues where, whenever I give these speeches, I get called out of like, you say trans kids don't exist, or you want to just say that they need to go. That's not what anyone is saying. Okay. We recognize that there are real people who are undergoing this specific issue, whether it's gender dysphoria or they're gender nonconforming or, LGBTA, they exist and we see them and we want to care for them, and they should have a safe and secure place to come in and feel welcomed and go to school. But school is not a place to, promote social ideology. It is not a place to, force everyone to conform to one idea or another. And so I was mentioning that teachers have the opt-out option, but students do not, right? And students can be referred to the office for not conforming with a student's preferred name or pronoun, and that can be deemed as bullying. And the fact that that's not been excluded for religious exemption is confusing me, because that's now become forced or coerced speech. And if we want to say that we're pillars of, constitutional rights and, freedom of speech in schools, that's limited in certain areas, right? But how can you then say that a student has to uphold or go by what someone else has requested they call them? And again, we are all compassionate people. We want to care for them. But I think the best way to care for these students is to tell them the truth. And the truth is nothing gets better by going down this route of quote unquote gender affirming care. Most of Europe is walking back all of their recommendations on undergoing any sort of gender reassignment surgery or undergoing medications. It is not helping. In fact, suicide rates are increasing. And I think having an honest conversation about who you are at your core and your identity, and finding that in some place other than your sexuality or your gender identity will help these kids be much better off and help their mental health. And I think getting off social media and off of technology would be a huge help as well.
You bring up an interesting point. Europe is walking back all of their policies that create any permanent change in a child until they reach an age of majority, right? Which is common sense. And given time for kids to work it out on their own, instead of rushing into gender reassignment surgery or chemical or drugs, seems to be common sense.
That's right. So I think that we become so polarized as a society, and we categorize each other as other, and that if you are not in this group of, us, that you are the enemy. And I think that social media definitely hyper inflates that. And I do think that some of that's intentional to distract us from bigger issues. And I do believe as Americans, we have more in common than we think, and that we would find more common ground if we would have those types of conversations. But it is very frustrating and sad. And I love that your teacher did that, because like you said, I did those same things in my classroom, where you need to learn how to be, how to disagree agreeably, right? And my dad taught me that. My dad is a pastor. And so I grew up just learning how to have, conversations and to think critically and analyze concepts and come up with conclusions, right? And I wanted to instill that in my students as well. But I will tell you, it is also very hard to break bread with people who think you deserve to die. So on September 11th, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I went to a school board meeting. I had not announced or decided yet if I was going to run, but the Better Maryland Schools parents were there in opposition to Policy 443. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I just wanted to be there in support of this group that I had met some people at. And the Democratic Socialists were there, and Antifa showed up, and all of these folks that were in support of Policy 443 were there. And as I walked up, there was a person holding up a sign that said, protect trans kids, and it had a rifle on it. And I think there was something else. I can't remember all the different signs, but I asked them, I said, hey, do you think having a rifle, it was shoot Nazis, not trans kids, or something like that. And I said, do you think having this sign is appropriate in light of what just happened to Charlie Kirk? And he said, do you support Charlie Kirk? And I said, well, yeah, I think that he was a common sense thinker and a Christian man and open dialogue and conversations. He goes, well, then you're a Nazi also, and you deserve to die. And I said, whoa, I don't think we can have any common ground here right now. So,
and I bet that conversation happened through a black mask.
it did. Funny you should say that, Mark. It very much did.
Yeah.
And so as I made my way up through the crowd, I was followed by a bunch of folks in black masks, and I tried to go talk to people who were not masked and had really good conversations. I heard their perspective. They heard my perspective. It was very enlightening, and I really appreciated those conversations. But eventually, the drum beating, horn honking, black masked people pushed the Better Maryland Schools folks all the way up to the edge of the sidewalk, where they formed a prayer circle at the very edge of the school board building. And yet still, and there was an individual there who got in my face and said, "You're evil and I want you gone." And I said, "Brother, we have given you this entire sidewalk. Can you not just back off and let these elderly ladies pray for these kids?" And they said, "I want you gone." I said, "Then there's no common ground here." I was surrounded by Antifa. They're honking a horn in my ear. And it was just the most lunacy, insane thing I've ever seen coming from, a school board meeting here in Frederick County. So I believe there are, a large group of independents, a large group of moderates, a large group of common sense folks that are just tired of the rhetoric. They're tired of being lied to. They just want their kids to go to school and to have a good education, to be safe, to be cared for. And those are the parents that we're really fighting for. That's who I am, right? I'm just a dad in Frederick County, father of 3. I coach sports, for my kids. I'm in the National Guard. was a teacher. And I'm just trying to support my kids in schools and help others do the same. And, we know we're not going to win the votes of those folks who are screaming through megaphones and honking horns in people's ears and yelling at old ladies. That just is not a common sense person. That's not a reasonable argument. We're here for the folks that are just concerned with what they're seeing in schools and think there could be a better option. And when they hear folks who are on the board say things like, "Well, yeah, we know that academics are an issue, and we're going to blame it on COVID," or we know the discipline in the classroom is a problem, but we're going to solve it in the next election. Well, you've been on the board, right, for many years. You've had a majority for forever, and you have not solved these issues. I'm very weary of anyone in leadership who has said, "Trust me, I'll do it next time." You should have already done it, right? The time has already passed. It's time for new leadership, and that's why our slate is running for academic excellence, school choice. And I know we didn't get into a lot of these things. If we have time, I'd love to, but, and school safety and some of these, again, basics and fundamentals that are common sense.
Well, those fundamentals and common sense, there's empirical evidence for that, because the charter school of Frederick County, all of the private schools, including the Catholic schools and the religious schools, and homeschoolers are consistently kicking the ever-living stuffing out of the scores of public school kids with literacy, math skills, STEM skills, all of them. Those kids are required to be respectful. They're required to wear uniforms. They're required to come in. They do no ideological training whatsoever. It is, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they're highly successful. That's what our schools used to be. But how much do you think that these Antifa and these anti and the LBGT activists that show up at these school boards, how much do you think they're being stirred up by the teachers' unions?
Oh, man. Mark, I already told you I like to think the best in folks. And so I don't want to think that is what's happening. I think the teachers' union definitely is a left-wing funded, group. I think that they hand select their candidates in an unethical manner because they're giving money to candidates that are then going to be basically negotiating teacher salaries. So I have taken an ethical pledge that I will not take any money from the union or any special interest group like that. Yeah, it's incredibly unethical, and that's why they become just a talking head for whatever the teachers union wants. And let me be clear, I'm not anti-union as a whole, right? I think that as a true believer in a republic, I believe in representative bodies. So the idea of, hey, I'm a teacher and I don't have time to go lobby on my own behalf, I'm going to nominate or vote for or elect somebody to go do that. Super, right? That's great. Where it becomes mandated that you must pay dues and be part of this organization, and that they're going to go and maybe lobby on things that you don't agree with. That's where I think it becomes a bit of a bureaucratic monopoly.
Moving forward into this election, the voters are going to have to decide where Frederick County goes: common sense and parental rights, or the school board and the school dictating how our children are raised. If you are elected, how are you going to solve these problems? What is the first thing you're going to do?
First thing I'm going to do is ensure our kids' safety. Physically is the most important thing for me. So being in the military, and I used to be a previous job was in IT infrastructure and security. And the fact that when I taught at Monocacy, there was a door that was so old that you could pull really hard and yank it open, and it would pop open. That is not okay. The building didn't feel safe, and I was in a portable outside the building, and it just felt like we were vulnerable. There was an active shooter situation on Fort Detrick, and we were told to hunker in place. So overall, we have a safety issue in FCPS. We have an aging security infrastructure with access control systems. Yes, our new schools are getting updated infrastructure, but our aging schools need to have better access control systems with the potential for weapons detection systems and shooter detection systems in the building, with direct access to the local police force, improved cameras, and then better security. Overall, where I'd be a huge advocate of increasing SROs in the buildings. The idea that you have one per cluster of elementary schools and middle schools is crazy to me, because what if there's an incident at one and then another incident at another? I think there should be one SRO at each school, and that SRO has a relationship with those kids and gets to know those kids and can even act kind of as a first line of defense for any behavioral issues inside the building, and create a positive relationship with law enforcement. I think dads need to get involved. I think we need to bring back dads into lunches, into recess, and get them more involved in the building so that their kids can see that their fathers are actively engaged in their education. So physical security would be my first thing, because as a parent, you should know that your child is safe from the moment they get on the bus to the moment they walk back into your home. And that's a crucial thing. The other points would be obviously academic excellence. We have a clear plan for a focus on reading, writing, and math with early intervention, where students are reading on grade level by third grade, right? The classical education model, limiting technology in the classroom, getting rid of the cell phones in the classroom, and really things that we've already seen work, right? We just have to have the intestinal fortitude to implement these policies that might not sound popular to these kids, but are really going to be ultimately helping them in the future.
Hold on, Tyler, are you saying we have to say no to kids? No cell phones? We would have to actually step up and be a parent? Or an educator or a disciplinarian?
That's right. Yeah, when I was teaching at Monocacy, I had 1/3 of the class sitting in the front that wanted to learn, and the 2/3 in the back were just on their phones or doing, TikTok dances, and I couldn't take their phones, and it was just chaos. And I talked to another teacher. I said, "What do we do, man? I'm not used to this." And he said, "You need to make a deal with the craziest ones in the classroom and tell them that they can do whatever they want as long as they don't disturb the kids that actually want to learn." And I said, "This is madness, right?" Wow. I've become a classroom facilitator. I'm no longer a teacher. And there was just very limited help. So that's where it would kind of go into this other point of wanting to support teachers more with better qualified aides in the classroom. If you have an ESL class, you should have a teacher that can help potentially even translate some of the information, but also having requirements for gates for students to be able to enter into regular education classrooms versus being in a contained Spanish speaking classroom, or whatever that their language is. But having aides that can help facilitate that. Special education would be a huge goal. The fact that we don't have cameras in nonverbal classrooms is wild to me. And it's only come because of the parents that had such a severe pushback on the lack of action, which resulted in the sexual assault of many nonverbal students in our schools. And, again, as someone being a large proponent of security, I just find it abysmal that it took so long to respond, and that now they're just coming out with a pilot program. I get the concerns about accessibility, but ultimately these kids cannot advocate for themselves. They are vulnerable, and we owe it to their parents to protect them when they're in our buildings. Huge proponent of charter schools, Montessori schools, career technical. The fact that we have a wait list for career tech is crazy. We should create even a new expanded career tech building for technology and for engineering and science. We have all down I-270 is the biotech corridor, right? We need to allow these kids to learn trades that can lead them into 6-figure jobs, as soon as they graduate. I mean, these exist. They're right down the road from us. And instead we have a wait list. Not every kid learns the same. And the idea that we're just going to park them in a desk and tell them to sit down and be quiet, for 60 to 90 minutes might not work for every child, right? And that's why the Montessori schools are great. That's why the charter schools and the career tech schools are great. We need to expand access to alternative educational models to include homeschooling and private school. In a perfect world, I would love to see, we spend what, 19 some $1,000s a year on a kid. I would love to see that money go back to the parents so they can decide what they want to do with it. If they decide to pull from public school, that's not my call, right? But I think that would be a pretty cool world. Or, overall, we could look at what Carroll County is doing and reduce our overall spending per pupil, and yet they have a larger or a better academic rate overall than we do in Frederick County. So they figured out something out there in Carroll.
We actually had Steve Whistler on the show from Carroll County.
He's the man.
He basically told us that the reason Carroll County public schools do so well is they do the basics. They don't allow indoctrination. They don't allow any of that craziness. They don't. Not that it's not part of the world. It's just not important when you're trying to teach kids the basics. They went back to the basics. That's what Carroll County's always done. And their literacy rate is one of the best in the state. And as you said, the price per child is lower than almost any county in the state.
Isn't it weird how you just focus on academics and the basics and you can see results? So
that the teachers union want us to throw more and more money at the budgets to take care of these problems that some people would say they created themselves.
I couldn't agree more. I think that that's the other aspect of our campaign is fiscal responsibility. Frederick County Public Schools spends over $1 billion a year on education. And what are we getting for our money, right? An inflated overhead, this bureaucratic, red tape, and a continuing growing central office while students or teachers are still using their own money to pay for classroom materials. We're, the largest employer, right? So we need to have great infrastructure. We need to hire, train, and retain good teachers. I believe in good teacher pay. I believe in incentive programs to retain teachers. I believe in great benefits. And especially for our, faculty workers, even outside of, our educators, but our support staff, the bus drivers, everybody, right? You want to have a place where you feel that you're valued, that you're paid well, and that your benefits will be there, towards the important years of your life, because it's your money, it's your tax dollars, and we are beholden to you, the taxpayer, for what we use that money for. And right now, I don't think that there's very good stewardship or fiscal responsibility there.
My taxes are paying somebody. I want to see some results.
That's right.
I don't want to see literacy rates plunging and children having major issues and them teaching immaterial matter in a classrooms to indoctrinate my kid. Just teach them the basics. That's all I care about. I'll take care of the rest. I'm a parent.
And then blaming it on outside factors. Oh, it's a problem because of the pandemic, or, classroom discipline is because of the pandemic. Like, how many years are we going to continue to use that as an excuse before we come up with solutions, instead of throwing our hands up and saying, well, it's just the nature of what's going on in America. Well, why is it not happening in the private schools and in the charter schools? What did they do to figure it out? And I want to be clear. FCPS is a overall good school district, right? People move here because they want their kids to go to FCPS. We saw immediately early intervention for my son for reading, and we've been blown away by the teachers out on this side of the county. And I know that regardless of where the teachers are, I worked with great teachers at Monocacy. I know there's great teachers at Walkersville. I know there's great teachers at TJ and at Brunswick and at Middletown. They're everywhere, right? And we need to champion those great teachers because they are doing incredible work. All of our schools should be supporting these students. We should have the same level of, care and access, to accommodations at every school. And you should want to move to Frederick County regardless of what the school area is in that pipeline, because we're the champions of academic excellence, and we need to get back to that.
I agree. By the way, my wife and I moved here to Myersville, Middletown area, so that we love the school there. Our kids are now 23 and 21, both doing very, very well. Yeah, we should go on record saying we love the Middletown, Myersville school system. The teachers are phenomenal. Tyler, I'm going to give you the last word. You got 20% of this population will never vote for you in ever, because they think you're conservative. You got 20% they're going to vote for you no matter what, because they believe you're conservative. Tell the 60% in the middle right now why they should vote for you.
Yeah. So I'm a father, I'm a Christian. I'm a sports coach, former teacher. So I've been in the classroom and seen the issues firsthand. I talked to other teachers while I was there. I wrote down the issues that they were experiencing, and I advocated on their behalf to the school board when I was in Fauquier County and here in Frederick County. And now I want to champion those issues and to find solutions on the school board. I wrote the school board when I resigned, what those issues were, and I understand the issues facing our teachers and parents right now, whether it's, the discipline issues in the classroom, lack of transparency and accountability, parental rights, all the things that common sense parents are concerned about. I'm just a dad, right? I'm a Army officer in the Maryland Army National Guard. Again, I've been in for 16 years. I know what it means to serve. I know what it means to lead. And I hope that, again, based on my experience, the things that I stand for, you can look at my website, walkerforfrederick.com or the commonsenseslate.com to learn more about, our slate and what we stand for. I'm running with two incredible people, and Jeff Seidel and Shelly Potter. And I hope that they can come on soon too and talk about their backgrounds. And overall, we're backed by the Orange Ballot, which again is promoting common sense parental rights. And that's where, Heather Fletcher comes in as well as another, champion of parental rights. And hopefully, again, folks can just look at, what's going on in schools right now. Do you feel like you're being informed? Do you feel like their academics are going the direction they should based on the money that, is being spent? Are you okay with, what's being taught and the secrets that are being kept? And if not, there is an alternative. And again, we're not the teachers union puppets. We are common sense folks fighting for parents and fighting for students. And together, we believe that we can right the ship on our academic issues and make FCPS better for everybody.
Well, Tyler Walker, candidate for Board of Education for Frederick County, thank you so much for being on the program. It was very enjoyable talking to you about these subjects. This has been this episode of Mid-Maryland Votes, folks. If you care about the children in Frederick County, get involved, research the subjects, look at what's happening and the erosion of parental rights, and do something about it. When can they vote, Tyler? What's the vote schedule?
Early voting is coming up. So June 11th through the 18th is early voting, and then June 23rd is the primary. So the real quick plug I'll give for this is your top 8 candidates are going to make it through the primary because there are 4 seats on the board. And so 8 of the, is it 12 or 13 right now, will make it through. And then November 3rd, you'll vote for your top 4 again, who will, ultimately make it on the board. So there are the 4 backed, teachers union candidates that, like we mentioned, are 2 incumbents telling us, hey, we've been doing this for years, but trust us to do it better next time. You've got 2, one who's been placed on the board, another that's been in education for a long time, but is advocating for everything that goes against parental rights. So that's the teachers union candidates. And then you have 4 common sense candidates. Again, Heather Fletcher, Shelly Potter, Jeff Seidel, Tyler Walker, all backed by the Orange Ballot. We are the common sense slate of the 3 of us, as I mentioned, who are backed by Better Maryland Schools. And, we've got the support of the local common sense parents.
Folks, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mark, very much. I really appreciate your time, and thank you to your audience.
All right, folks, we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes. That was Frederick County Board of Education candidate Tyler Walker, Army veteran, father, and former teacher, discussing one of the biggest issues facing schools across America today: parental rights and the role education should play in our children's lives. Whether you agree or disagree, tonight's conversation made clear that many families see this not as a partisan fight, but as a matter of trust, transparency, and common sense. At Mid-Maryland Votes, we still believe in doing things the old-fashioned way: face-to-face, honest, respectful, and without the social media cheap shots. Like, follow, and share for more content like this, and we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.